Marcus Thompson wiped the sweat from his forehead as he adjusted the colorful balloons tied to the restaurant chairs. The local pizza place buzzed with weekend energy, families laughing over shared meals while children ran between tables. He checked his watch nervously. 2:30 p.m. The birthday party would start in 30 minutes, and everything had to be perfect for his daughter Emma's 8th birthday. Being a single father wasn't easy, especially when your child was born deaf. Marcus had learned American Sign Language when Emma was just 2 years old, after the doctors confirmed what he had suspected for months. While other parents worried about scraped knees and homework, Marcus navigated a world of silent communication, visual cues, and constant advocacy for his daughter's needs. Emma sat at the decorated table, her eyes bright with excitement as she watched her father arrange the pizza boxes and cake. Her small hands moved gracefully through the air, signing her thoughts to him with the fluid movements that had become their private language. "Dad, will Sarah come today?" she asked through her gestures. Marcus smiled and signed back. "Yes, sweetie. All your friends from school will be here soon." What he didn't tell her was how many parents had politely declined the invitation once they learned about Emma's deafness. Some claimed scheduling conflicts, others simply never responded. The guest list had shrunk from 20 children to just 7. But Marcus was determined to make this day special regardless. The first guests arrived right on time, the Martinez family with their twin boys, followed by Emma's best friend Lily and her mother. Marcus had spent weeks preparing information sheets for the parents, explaining basic signs and tips for communicating with Emma. Some parents seemed genuinely interested, while others appeared uncomfortable, staying glued to their phones instead of engaging. As the children played games, Marcus noticed how naturally some of Emma's classmates had picked up simple signs. Lily had been learning sign language for months and could hold basic conversations with Emma. The twins, though younger, mimicked Emma's gestures with enthusiasm, creating their own version of communication that made all the children giggle. The real surprise came when a black sedan pulled up outside the restaurant. Marcus recognized it immediately. It belonged to Victoria Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Industries, the largest employer in their small town. Victoria was known for her business acumen and community involvement, but Marcus had only seen her in newspaper photos and local news interviews. Victoria stepped out of the car with a young girl who appeared to be around Emma's age. The child had the same confident posture as her mother, but seemed hesitant as they approached the restaurant entrance. Marcus assumed they were just stopping for lunch and continued organizing the party games. To his surprise, Victoria walked directly to their party area. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Are you Marcus Thompson?" Marcus nodded, wondering how this prominent businesswoman knew his name. "Yes, that's me. Is everything okay?" "I'm Victoria Sterling, and this is my daughter, Sophie. We received an invitation to Emma's birthday party through Sophie's school." Victoria's voice was professional but warm. "I apologize for not responding sooner. We've been traveling for business." Marcus felt confused. He was certain he hadn't invited anyone named Sophie, and he definitely would have remembered sending an invitation to the CEO's daughter. Before he could respond, Sophie stepped forward and began signing with perfect fluency. "Happy birthday, Emma." Sophie's hands moved with practiced precision. "I'm sorry we're late. I brought you a present." The entire restaurant seemed to pause. Marcus watched in amazement as his daughter's face lit up with pure joy. Emma jumped from her chair and ran to Sophie, her hands moving rapidly as she signed her excitement and gratitude. Victoria watched the interaction with a soft smile. Sophie has been learning about Emma in her inclusion class at school. When she heard about the birthday party, she insisted we attend. "I hope you don't mind the surprise." Marcus felt overwhelmed with emotion. "Mind, this is incredible." "But how does Sophie know sign language so well?" "Sophie was born with mild hearing loss," Victoria explained quietly. "While she uses hearing aids now, we learned ASL when she was younger, in case her condition worsened. She's maintained her fluency because she finds the language beautiful." The revelation changed the entire dynamic of the party. Sophie's presence seemed to give the other children permission to be more curious and engaged. She helped translate conversations, taught simple signs, and made sure Emma was included in every activity. Marcus watched as his daughter experienced something he had rarely seen: complete social inclusion among her peers. As the afternoon progressed, Marcus found himself in conversation with Victoria, about the challenges of raising children with hearing differences. Despite their vastly different economic circumstances, they shared similar experiences with medical appointments, educational advocacy, and the constant worry about their children's social acceptance. You know, Victoria said as they watched the children play. Sophie talks about Emma all the time at home. She's mentioned how smart and funny Emma is, how she helps other kids in class, and how she wishes more people would learn to sign. Marcus felt tears welling in his eyes. For years he had worried that Emma felt isolated or different. Hearing that she was making such positive impressions on her classmates filled him with pride and relief. The party games continued with renewed energy. Sophie helped organize a treasure hunt, where all the clues were given in both spoken English and ASL. The children took turns learning to sign their names, with Emma patiently teaching each letter. Marcus captured every moment with his camera, knowing these memories would be treasured forever. When it came time to cut the cake, all the children gathered around singing "Happy Birthday," while simultaneously signing the words. Emma stood in the center, absolutely glowing with happiness. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like his daughter was experiencing the kind of normal childhood moment he had always dreamed of for her. As the party began winding down, Victoria approached Marcus again. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but what do you do for work?" "I'm a maintenance supervisor at the county offices," Marcus replied, suddenly feeling self-conscious about his modest job compared to her corporate empire. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. Sophie mentioned that Emma is incredibly bright and creative. "Have you thought about what schools you'd like her to attend as she gets older?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He had been so focused on navigating elementary school challenges that he hadn't given much thought to Emma's long-term educational future. The conversation planted seeds in his mind about possibilities he had never considered before. The following Monday morning brought an unexpected phone call that would change everything for Marcus and Emma. Marcus was replacing fluorescent bulbs in the county courthouse when his cell phone buzzed. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but something prompted him to answer. "Mr. Thompson, this is Janet Rodriguez from Sterling Industries. Ms. Sterling would like to schedule a meeting with you this week if possible." Marcus nearly dropped his phone. "A meeting? Is everything okay? Did something happen at the party?" Janet's voice was reassuring. "Nothing's wrong at all. Ms. Sterling was quite impressed with you and Emma over the weekend. She has a business proposition she'd like to discuss." After agreeing to meet Thursday afternoon, Marcus spent the next 3 days in a state of nervous anticipation. He couldn't imagine what kind of business proposition a CEO would have for a maintenance worker. Emma noticed his distraction and kept asking through sign language if he was feeling sick. Thursday arrived with unseasonably warm weather for October. Marcus had borrowed a tie from his neighbor and pressed his best shirt, hoping he looked professional enough for whatever lay ahead. Sterling Industries occupied a gleaming glass building downtown, a stark contrast to the government offices where Marcus spent his days fixing broken pipes and changing air filters. The lobby impressed him with its marble floors and modern artwork. Janet Rodriguez greeted him personally, a kind woman in her 50s who immediately put him at ease with her warm smile. "Ms. Sterling is finishing up a conference call, but she'll be ready shortly," Janet explained as she led him to an elevator.
"Can I get you coffee or water?"
The executive floor felt like another world. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the town Marcus had lived in his entire life. But from this height, everything looked different. He could see Emma's school in the distance, the pizza restaurant where they'd celebrated just days before, and the modest neighborhood where they lived. Victoria's office door opened, and she emerged looking every bit the successful executive in a navy suit and confident stride. "Marcus, thank you so much for coming. Please have a seat." Her office was spacious but surprisingly personal. Family photos covered one wall, many featuring Sophie at various ages. Marcus noticed several pictures of Sophie signing, and one showed both Victoria and Sophie communicating with other deaf children. "I'll get straight to the point," Victoria began, settling into the chair across from him rather than behind her imposing desk. "Sophie hasn't stopped talking about Emma since the party. More importantly, that afternoon made me realize something about our company and our community." Marcus listened intently, still unsure where this conversation was heading. "Sterling Industries employs over 3,000 people in this region," Victoria continued. We pride ourselves on being family-friendly and community-focused. But Saturday made me realize we're failing an entire population, people who are deaf or hard of hearing. She pulled out a folder thick with documents. I've spent the last few days researching accessibility in the workplace. Do you know that less than 50% of deaf adults are employed full-time? The unemployment rate in the deaf community is nearly double the national average. Marcus nodded, having experienced this reality firsthand. Despite his skills and work ethic, advancement opportunities had been limited, partly due to communication barriers in meetings and professional development sessions. I want to change that. Starting with Sterling Industries, Victoria declared, I'm proposing to create the most inclusive workplace in the state for deaf and hard of hearing employees. But I need someone who understands this community, someone who's lived these challenges. The conversation took an unexpected turn. I'd like to offer you a position as our Director of Accessibility and Inclusion. Your job would be to help us transform our workplace culture, develop policies, train employees, and create pathways for deaf individuals to thrive in corporate environments. Marcus felt dizzy. I appreciate the thought, but I don't have any corporate experience. I fix broken things and maintain buildings, Victoria smiled. You've been maintaining your daughter's spirit and possibilities her entire life. You've navigated systems, advocated for inclusion, and created solutions where none existed. Those are exactly the skills I need. The salary she mentioned was more than double what Marcus earned at the county. But beyond the money, the opportunity to create change for people like Emma felt overwhelming. I know this is a big decision, Victoria acknowledged. Take time to think about it. But I want you to know this isn't charity or some feel-good gesture. After watching you with Emma, seeing how you've raised such a confident, happy child despite the challenges, I know you have insights our company needs. As they talked more, Victoria shared her vision. Sterling Industries would become a model for other companies, proving that inclusive hiring wasn't just morally right, but economically smart. They would create training programs, establish partnerships with schools for the deaf, and develop career pathways that had never existed in their region. There's something else, Victoria added as their meeting neared its end. Sophie has been asking if Emma might want to attend the Sterling Academy. Marcus had heard of the prestigious private school but knew it was far beyond his financial reach. That's very generous, but the tuition alone would be impossible for us. We offer full scholarships for employees' children, Victoria explained. But more than that, Sophie has convinced me that Sterling Academy needs to strengthen its inclusion program. Emma wouldn't just be receiving an education, she'd be helping create one that serves deaf students better. The weight of these possibilities felt enormous. Marcus thought about Emma's current school, where she was often the only deaf student in her classes. Despite the teacher's best efforts, he knew she missed out on many classroom discussions and social interactions. Could I bring Emma to meet you? Marcus asked impulsively. I mean, if this affects her education, she should have a say. Victoria's face brightened. I was hoping you'd ask. Sophie has been begging me to invite Emma over for dinner. What if we made it a family evening? You could see how the girls interact and we could discuss this more casually. As Marcus left the Sterling Industries building that afternoon, his mind raced with possibilities and concerns. The job offer represented security and purpose beyond anything he had imagined. But it also meant stepping into a world where he felt unprepared and potentially out of his depth. That evening, he sat with Emma at their kitchen table, trying to figure out how to explain the day's events. Emma was working on homework, her concentration complete as she solved math problems. Watching her, Marcus realized how much stronger and more resilient she had become over the years. Emma, he signed, getting her attention. How would you feel about going to a different school? One where there might be other kids who sign? Emma's eyes widened with interest. Really? Where? As Marcus began explaining about Victoria's offer and Sophie's school, he saw something in his daughter's expression he had never seen before. The possibility of belonging somewhere that celebrated rather than accommodated her differences. The conversation lasted well into the evening, with Emma asking thoughtful questions about new schools, new friends, and what it might mean for their life together. By bedtime, Marcus realized that his 8-year-old daughter might be braver about embracing change than he was. The dinner invitation came for the following Saturday, giving Marcus a full week to worry about everything from what to wear to whether Emma would feel comfortable in such an upscale environment. Victoria had suggested they meet at her home rather than a restaurant, explaining that it would be more relaxed for the girls to get to know each other. Marcus spent Friday evening shopping for something nicer than his usual weekend clothes. Emma helped him choose a button-down shirt and khakis, giggling as she signed her approval of his fancy appearance. For herself, she selected a bright purple dress that she claimed made her feel important. Saturday afternoon, they followed GPS directions through increasingly upscale neighborhoods until they reached Victoria's address. The house was elegant but not ostentatious, a two-story colonial with a welcoming front porch and well-maintained gardens. Marcus parked his aging Honda between Victoria's sedan and a smaller car that probably belonged to a housekeeper or nanny. Before they could knock, the front door opened to reveal Sophie bouncing with excitement. She immediately began signing to Emma, welcoming her with the enthusiasm of someone who had been counting down the minutes until their arrival. Victoria appeared behind her daughter, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, which helped Marcus feel less out of place. "Welcome. Please come in. I hope you're hungry." Sophie insisted on helping with dinner, so we're having her specialty, spaghetti and meatballs. The house's interior reflected the same understated elegance as its exterior. Family photos covered the mantel and side tables, showing Sophie and Victoria traveling together, participating in various activities, and clearly enjoying a close mother-daughter relationship. What struck Marcus most was how normal everything felt. Despite the obvious wealth difference, Victoria moved through her kitchen with the same harried energy of any working parent trying to coordinate dinner, homework, and conversation. "Sophie, show Emma your room while I finish up here," Victoria suggested. "Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes. As the girls disappeared upstairs, their hands moving in animated conversation, Victoria and Marcus found themselves alone in the kitchen. The awkwardness Marcus had anticipated never materialized. Instead, Victoria asked practical questions about Emma's education, her interests, and the challenges Marcus faced as a single parent. "I hope you don't mind me asking," Victoria said as she stirred the sauce, "but Emma's mother, is she involved in these decisions about school and Emma's future?" Marcus had expected this question and appreciated Victoria's directness. "Sarah left when Emma was 3. She struggled with Emma's deafness and felt like she couldn't handle the challenges. We haven't heard from her in 5 years." Victoria nodded without judgment. "That must have been incredibly difficult for both of you." "It was," Marcus admitted. "But honestly, Emma barely remembers her and we've built a good life together. Sometimes I think children are more resilient than we give them credit for." Laughter from upstairs interrupted their conversation. The sound of Sophie's voice mixed with the visual glimpses of Emma's animated signing created a symphony of childhood joy that both parents recognized. When the girls joined them for dinner, Marcus witnessed something remarkable. Sophie seamlessly switched between speaking aloud for her mother's benefit and signing with Emma, often doing both simultaneously. She had clearly become fluent in the art of being a bridge between the hearing and deaf worlds. Emma, usually quiet around new adults, seemed completely comfortable with Victoria. She shared stories about school, her favorite books, and her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. Victoria responded with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions and sharing relevant experiences from Sophie's life. "Mom," Sophie interjected during a pause in conversation, "Emma wants to know if she can see your office tomorrow. I told her about the aquarium you have there." Marcus started to explain that they wouldn't want to impose on Victoria's Sunday, but Victoria immediately began planning the visit. "That's a wonderful idea. I need to pick up some files anyway. Emma, would you like to see where Mommy works?" The ease with which Victoria included Emma in her life struck Marcus deeply. There was no condescension or special accommodation, just natural inclusion. After dinner, the adults sat in the living room while the girls played board games on the floor. Victoria brought up the job offer again, but this time the conversation felt less formal and more collaborative. "I've been thinking about what you said regarding your lack of corporate experience," Victoria began. "You're right that you haven't worked in a boardroom before, but you've done something much more challenging. You've raised a confident, articulate child who happens to be deaf in a world that's not always welcoming to differences." She pulled out her tablet and showed Marcus preliminary plans her team had developed. We want to start with basic sign language classes for all employees, then move to more comprehensive accessibility training. Eventually, we'd like to create internship programs and career pipelines for deaf students. The scope of the vision was breathtaking. Marcus could see how this initiative might change not just individual lives, but entire community attitudes toward deafness and disability. The salary is important, Marcus acknowledged, but what really appeals to me is the chance to create opportunities for kids like Emma. If this works, other companies might follow your lead. Victoria smiled. Exactly. We have the resources and platform to demonstrate that inclusive hiring isn't just good ethics, it's good business. As the evening wound down, Sophie walked over to Marcus with a serious expression on her young face. Through sign language, she said, "Emma is my best friend now. Will you please take the job so she can come to my school?" The innocence and directness of her request touched Marcus deeply. Emma, who had been watching their conversation, signed back to Sophie, "I want to come to your school too, and I want my dad to help other deaf people get good jobs." Looking at his daughter's hopeful face, Marcus realized that his fears about stepping into an unfamiliar corporate world were less important than the opportunities this change could create for Emma and others like her. "All right," he said, looking directly at Victoria. "I'll take the job. But I want to be clear. I'll need a lot of support and training to succeed in this role." Victoria's smile was radiant. "You'll have all the support you need, and more importantly, you'll have Sophie and Emma as your consultants. They'll keep us honest about whether we're really creating the inclusive environment we're promising." The girls erupted in celebration, immediately planning sleepovers and school activities they could share. Watching them together, Marcus saw a glimpse of the future Emma might have, one where her deafness was simply one aspect of who she was, not the defining characteristic that limited her possibilities. As they prepared to leave, Victoria handed Marcus a thick folder. "This contains everything you need to know about the position, benefits, and timeline. Take your time reviewing it, but if you're serious about this, I'd like you to start in 3 weeks, driving home that night." Emma signed excitedly about Sophie, the new school, and all the changes coming their way. Marcus listened and responded, but part of his mind was processing the magnitude of what had just happened. In the space of a week, their entire life trajectory had changed. Emma would attend one of the region's best schools. Marcus would have a career that gave him purpose beyond just earning a paycheck. And they would both be part of creating something that could benefit countless other families. The risk felt enormous, but so did the potential rewards. As they pulled into their driveway, Marcus looked at their modest home and wondered what kind of house they might be able to afford with his new salary. More importantly, he wondered what kind of future Emma might build with the educational opportunities that were about to open up for her. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood outside the Sterling Industries building, wearing his first business suit and carrying a leather briefcase that Victoria had insisted the company provide. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted his tie, not from nerves about the new job, but from the emotional weight of how dramatically his and Emma's lives were about to change. Emma had started at Sterling Academy the previous Monday, and the transformation in her confidence was already visible. Each day she came home with stories about teachers who could sign, classmates who were learning ASL as a foreign language option, and academic challenges that excited rather than frustrated her. Victoria met Marcus in the lobby personally, a gesture that surprised him given her position. "Ready for your first day as Director of Accessibility and Inclusion?" she asked with a warm smile. The title still felt surreal to Marcus. Just a month ago, he had been replacing broken ceiling tiles and unclogging toilets. Now he was responsible for creating policies that could affect thousands of employees and potentially influence corporate practices across the region. His new office was located on the 3rd floor, strategically positioned between human resources and employee development. The space was modern and professional, with a conference table for meetings and wall space where Marcus could display resources and educational materials about deaf culture and accessibility. Janet Rodriguez knocked on his door mid-morning with a stack of files. "These are the preliminary reports from our employee survey about accessibility awareness," she explained. "The results are eye-opening." Marcus reviewed the data with growing understanding of the challenge ahead. Less than 15% of Sterling Industries employees had any experience communicating with deaf individuals. Many had never considered how their daily work practices might exclude colleagues with hearing differences. Most shocking was the number of employees who admitted they would feel uncomfortable or unprepared if asked to work directly with a deaf colleague. "This is actually good news," Marcus told Janet, surprising her. "At least now we know exactly what we're working with. Honest ignorance is much easier to address than willful discrimination." His first major initiative was designing a company-wide introduction to deaf awareness. Rather than dry lectures about compliance and legal requirements, Marcus structured the training around real stories and practical scenarios. He invited members of the local deaf community to share their experiences, both positive and negative, in workplace settings. The response exceeded everyone's expectations. Employees signed up for voluntary ASL classes in such large numbers that the company had to hire 3 additional instructors. The cafeteria began offering visual announcements alongside audio ones. Meeting organizers started providing written agendas and ensuring note-takers were available for important discussions. But the real breakthrough came during Marcus's 3rd week when he received an unexpected visitor. David Chen, a software engineer who had been with the company for 6 years, knocked tentatively on Marcus's office door. David had been hiding his progressive hearing loss for months, afraid that disclosure might affect his career advancement. He had been relying on lip reading and strategic positioning in meetings, growing increasingly exhausted from the effort required to keep up with workplace communication. "I heard about what you're doing here," David said quietly, "and I was wondering if maybe now would be a good time to be honest about my situation." Marcus spent 2 hours with David that afternoon, discussing accommodations, assistive technologies, and strategies for disclosure to his team. By the end of their conversation, David looked like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "I've been so afraid that people would see me as less capable," David admitted. "But watching how the company is embracing these changes, I'm starting to think maybe being deaf doesn't have to mean being disadvantaged." Word of David's situation spread quickly through the company, but not in the way Marcus had feared. Instead of gossip or pity, David received overwhelming support from his colleagues. His team proactively learned basic signs related to their work. His manager ensured all meetings included visual components and follow-up summaries. Most importantly, David's expertise and contributions became more visible once he wasn't exhausting his energy just trying to follow conversations. His productivity increased, and he began volunteering for leadership roles he had previously avoided. The success with David opened floodgates Marcus hadn't expected. 3 other employees disclosed various hearing differences they had been concealing. 2 parents reached out about children with hearing loss, seeking advice about educational options. A department manager requested specific training for her team because they were about to hire a deaf intern. Victoria observed these developments with obvious satisfaction during their weekly meetings. "You've created something remarkable here," she told Marcus during one of their Friday afternoon check-ins. "But I have to ask, how are you handling all of this personally?" It was a perceptive question. The professional success had been gratifying, but the emotional impact was overwhelming. Marcus found himself becoming the face of deaf advocacy, not just within Sterling Industries, but throughout the broader business community. Local media had covered the company's initiative, and other employers were reaching out for guidance. "Some days I feel like I'm carrying the hopes of every deaf person in the region," Marcus admitted. "It's a lot of pressure to be perfect, to never make mistakes that might set back the cause." Victoria nodded understandingly. "I felt the same way when I became one of the youngest female CEOs in the state. Every decision felt like it was being evaluated, not just on its merits, but as a reflection of whether women could handle executive leadership." She shared strategies for managing the stress of representative responsibility while staying focused on the actual work. "Remember, you're not responsible for solving every problem or representing every perspective. You're responsible for creating systems and opportunities. Other people will build on what you start." The reminder helped Marcus refocus on sustainable progress rather than trying to achieve everything immediately. He began delegating more responsibilities to team members, training other employees to facilitate accessibility workshops, and building infrastructure that could function without his constant involvement. Emma's integration into Sterling Academy was proceeding beautifully. She had joined the school's debate team, where her visual spatial processing skills gave her unique advantages in organizing arguments. Her science teacher, impressed by Emma's analytical thinking, had recommended her for an advanced summer program at the state university. Most importantly, Emma was developing friendships with both deaf and hearing classmates. Sophie remained her closest friend, but she was no longer her only bridge to the hearing world. Emma was learning to advocate for herself, to educate others about deaf culture, and to see her deafness as a difference that brought unique perspectives rather than limitations. The transformation in both their lives felt miraculous some days. Marcus remembered the morning just 3 months earlier when he had been worried about Emma's 8th birthday party guest list. Now she was thriving in an environment where her intelligence and personality could shine fully. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in Marcus himself. For 8 years, his identity had been primarily defined by being Emma's father and advocate. While that remained central to who he was, he now had professional purpose that extended beyond his family. He was creating pathways for other parents like himself, other children like Emma, and other adults like David who simply needed opportunities to demonstrate their capabilities. The work was challenging and sometimes exhausting, but it felt like the job he had been preparing for his entire life without realizing it. As his first month in the new position drew to a close, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that Saturday afternoon birthday party. What had started as a simple celebration had revealed possibilities none of them had imagined. Emma was flourishing academically and socially. Marcus had found meaningful career purpose. Victoria's company was becoming a model for inclusive practices. Most importantly, they were proving that accommodation and inclusion weren't acts of charity, but investments in human potential that benefited everyone involved. 6 months into his new role, Marcus faced his biggest challenge yet when Sterling Industries was selected to host the Regional Business Inclusion Summit. Companies from across 3 states would send representatives to learn about best practices for disability inclusion in the workplace. The pressure to demonstrate real success rather than just good intentions felt enormous. Victoria had volunteered Sterling Industries for this showcase, confident in the progress they had made. But as Marcus prepared presentations and coordinated logistics, he worried about whether their initiatives would hold up under intense scrutiny from other business leaders. The week before the summit, an unexpected complication arose. The keynote speaker, a renowned disability rights advocate, had to cancel due to a family emergency. Victoria asked Marcus if he would be willing to step in and deliver the opening address. "I'm not a public speaker," Marcus protested. "I fix things and solve problems quietly. Standing in front of 200 business executives talking about policy and inclusion, that's not what I do." Victoria sat across from him in his office, her expression patient but determined. "Marcus, you've lived this reality. You've raised a deaf daughter, navigated systems that weren't designed for you, and transformed workplace culture through practical solutions. Those executives need to hear from someone who understands these issues from the inside." That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table trying to draft remarks while Emma worked on homework nearby. The blank page seemed to mock his efforts to capture 8 years of parenting challenges and 6 months of professional learning in a 20-minute speech. Emma noticed his frustration and signed. "What's wrong, Dad?" Marcus explained about the summit and his fears about speaking publicly. Emma listened thoughtfully, then said something that surprised him. "Dad, you've been giving speeches my whole life. Every time you explained my deafness to a teacher, every time you advocated for me in a meeting, every time you showed people how to communicate with me, those were all speeches." Her observation shifted his perspective entirely. Instead of trying to sound like a corporate executive or policy expert, Marcus decided to simply tell their story, the real experiences that had led them to this moment. The morning of the summit, Sterling Industries' main conference center buzzed with energy. Business leaders, HR professionals, and inclusion specialists filled the auditorium, their conversations creating a low hum of anticipation. Marcus stood backstage watching the crowd through a gap in the curtains, feeling his palms grow sweaty. Victoria found him there 10 minutes before his introduction. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Marcus admitted honestly. "What if I say something wrong? What if I give bad advice that other companies follow?" "Then you'll be human," Victoria replied simply. "These people aren't here because they want perfection. They're here because they want authenticity and practical guidance from someone who's actually doing the work. When Victoria introduced him, Marcus walked to the podium feeling like his legs might give out. But as he looked out at the audience and saw familiar faces, David Chen from his own company, several parents he'd met through Emma's school, local business owners who had started their own inclusion initiatives, his nervousness transformed into determination. 6 months ago, I was a maintenance supervisor who changed light bulbs and fixed broken pipes, Marcus began. Today, I'm supposed to be an expert on workplace inclusion. The truth is, I'm still learning. But I want to share what my daughter Emma has taught me about the difference between accommodation and inclusion. He told Emma's story, not as a sob story designed to evoke pity, but as an illustration of untapped potential that exists when barriers are removed. He described the birthday party where everything started, the surprise of meeting Sophie and Victoria, and the gradual realization that Emma's deafness was only limiting when the environment failed to accommodate it. Inclusion isn't about being nice to people with disabilities, Marcus explained to the attentive audience. It's about recognizing that different perspectives and experiences make organizations stronger, more innovative, and more responsive to diverse customer needs. He shared specific examples from Sterling Industries, David Chen's increased productivity once communication barriers were removed, the creative problem-solving approaches that deaf employees brought to technical challenges, and the improved team collaboration that resulted from everyone learning basic sign language. But the most powerful moment came when Marcus deviated from his prepared remarks. I know some of you are thinking about the costs, training expenses, accommodation requirements, potential productivity disruptions. Let me tell you about a different kind of cost. He described the years of watching Emma's potential being underutilized in educational settings that weren't designed for her. The waste of human talent when bright, capable people are excluded from opportunities simply because their communication style is different. The economic impact of unemployment and underemployment in the deaf community. The real question isn't whether you can afford to create inclusive workplaces, Marcus concluded. It's whether you can afford not to. The response was immediate and overwhelming. During the break, dozens of attendees approached Marcus with specific questions about implementation strategies. Several companies committed to piloting similar programs. 3 universities expressed interest in developing partnerships for deaf student internships. But the conversation that meant the most happened during lunch. A woman approached Marcus hesitantly, introducing herself as Rebecca Martinez, CEO of a mid-sized manufacturing company. My son was born deaf, she said quietly. He's 15 now, and I've been terrified about what kind of career opportunities will be available to him. Hearing your presentation gave me hope, but more than that, it gave me a roadmap for what I can do in my own company. Rebecca scheduled a follow-up meeting with Marcus the next week. Her company became Sterling Industries' first partner in expanding inclusive hiring practices beyond their own walls. The summit's success generated unexpected media attention. Local television stations covered the event, interviewing Marcus about the transformation at Sterling Industries. National business publications reached out for articles about innovative inclusion practices. Marcus found himself fielding calls from companies across the country seeking guidance. The attention was gratifying but overwhelming. Marcus had never imagined becoming a public figure, and the constant requests for interviews, speaking engagements, and consulting opportunities threatened to pull him away from the hands-on work he loved most. Emma noticed the change in their routine. Their quiet dinners were frequently interrupted by phone calls. Weekends that used to be devoted to family time now included travel to conferences and workshops. One evening, as Marcus rushed to finish dinner before a scheduled video interview, Emma signed a question that stopped him cold. "Dad, are you still happy with your job?" The directness of her question forced Marcus to examine what had been bothering him for weeks. The work itself remained fulfilling, but the pace and publicity were exhausting. He realized he had been so focused on expanding the mission that he was losing touch with the personal connections that had motivated him originally. That weekend, Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone, including Victoria. He requested a meeting to discuss restructuring his role to focus more on direct program development and less on external representation. "I know this might seem ungrateful," Marcus told Victoria in her office Monday morning. The speaking opportunities and media attention are incredible for raising awareness. But I'm more effective working directly with employees and developing practical solutions than I am being the public face of inclusion. Victoria listened thoughtfully before responding. You know what? I think you're absolutely right. We've proven the concept works. Now we need to focus on making it sustainable and replicable. They developed a new structure where Marcus would continue leading Sterling Industries' internal inclusion efforts while training other advocates to handle external speaking and consulting requests. This approach would multiply their impact while allowing Marcus to return to the work that energized him most. The change proved beneficial in unexpected ways. Marcus began mentoring other parents of deaf children, helping them navigate educational and career planning. He established partnerships with local deaf organizations to create pipeline programs for employment. Most importantly, he returned to regular involvement in Emma's education and activities. Emma's own growth continued to amaze everyone around her. At 9 years old, she was already showing leadership qualities that impressed her teachers and classmates. She had started a sign language club at Sterling Academy that attracted both deaf and hearing students. Her science fair project on visual learning techniques won the regional competition and qualified for state-level judging. But perhaps most significantly, Emma began expressing interest in following her father's path into advocacy work. During career day at school, she presented about deaf culture and workplace inclusion, demonstrating a natural ability to educate and inspire others. I want to help deaf kids like me know they can do anything, Emma signed to Marcus after her presentation. But I also want to help hearing people understand that we're not broken, we're just different. The wisdom in her words reminded Marcus of how far they had both traveled from that worried father, planning a birthday party just 1 year earlier. Emma's confidence and vision for her future reflected the transformation that inclusive environments could create when implemented thoughtfully and consistently. As the first anniversary of the birthday party approached, Marcus reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them to this point. What started as a simple desire to give his daughter a happy celebration had evolved into a mission that was changing lives throughout their community. The ripple effects continued expanding in ways Marcus had never anticipated, but the foundation remained the same: the belief that every person deserved opportunities to contribute their unique talents and perspectives to the world around them. 1 year after Emma's 8th birthday party, Marcus stood in the same pizza restaurant, but this time the celebration was very different. Sterling Industries had rented the entire venue for their first annual Inclusion Achievement Awards ceremony, recognizing employees and community partners who had contributed to creating a more accessible workplace. The restaurant was decorated not with children's birthday themes, but with elegant banners celebrating diversity and inclusion. Instead of 8 young party guests, nearly 200 people filled the space: employees, family members, community leaders, and representatives from partner organizations. Emma, now 9 and radiating confidence, served as one of the evening's presenters alongside Sophie. The two girls had become inseparable friends and powerful advocates for inclusion in their school and community. Watching them work together on stage, seamlessly switching between spoken English and ASL to ensure everyone could follow their presentation, Marcus marveled at how naturally they navigated between different worlds. This award goes to someone who transformed our understanding of what accommodation really means, Emma signed while Sophie spoke the words aloud. David Chen showed us that when we remove barriers, we don't just help individuals, we make our whole team stronger. David approached the podium to accept his recognition, but his acceptance speech focused entirely on thanking Marcus and the company for creating an environment where his deafness became an asset rather than an obstacle. A year ago, I was exhausted from pretending to hear everything in meetings, David shared with the audience. I was limiting my own contributions because I was afraid my hearing loss would be seen as a weakness. Today I'm leading a team of 12 people, and my different perspective on communication and problem solving has helped us develop better products for all our customers. The evening featured multiple success stories that had emerged from Sterling Industries' Inclusion Initiative. Maria Santos, a deaf graphic designer hired 6 months earlier, had revolutionized the company's visual communication strategies. Her designs incorporated universal accessibility principles that made information clearer for everyone, not just people with hearing differences. James Wright, a longtime employee who had hidden his progressive hearing loss for 3 years, had become an internal trainer for deaf awareness workshops. His insights from both hearing and deaf perspectives helped bridge understanding gaps that Marcus hadn't even realized existed. But the most emotional moment came when Victoria took the stage for the evening's final presentation. She had prepared remarks about the company's achievements and future goals, but instead she spoke directly from her heart. 13 months ago, my daughter, Sophie, came home from school talking about a classmate named Emma. Sophie was fascinated by Emma's ability to communicate in sign language and frustrated that more people couldn't understand this beautiful, visual language. Victoria looked directly at Marcus and Emma in the audience. When Sophie insisted we attend Emma's birthday party, I thought we were just being good neighbors. I had no idea we were about to embark on a journey that would transform our company and our community. She described the ripple effects that had spread far beyond Sterling Industries. 12 other companies in the region had implemented similar inclusion programs. The local community college had started offering ASL classes to meet growing demand. The city had hired its first deaf police officer and was training the entire force in basic sign language. But the real measure of our success isn't in policies or programs, Victoria continued. It's in the fact that children like Emma and Sophie are growing up in a world where differences are celebrated rather than hidden, where accessibility is built in rather than added on, and where every person can contribute their unique gifts. The ceremony concluded with a surprise announcement that left Marcus speechless. Victoria revealed that Sterling Industries, in partnership with the State University, was establishing the Emma Thompson Scholarship Fund for deaf students pursuing business and advocacy careers. Emma Thompson may only be 9 years old, Victoria explained, but she has already taught us more about leadership, courage, and inclusion than most graduate programs could provide. This scholarship will ensure that other young people have the same opportunities to develop their potential and create positive change. Emma stood up in the audience, tears streaming down her face as she signed "thank you" repeatedly. The entire room erupted in applause, both audible clapping and the visual applause of hundreds of hands waving in the air. The deaf community's way of showing approval and celebration. After the formal ceremony ended, Marcus found himself surrounded by people wanting to share their own stories or ask questions about future initiatives. But the conversation that meant the most happened in a quiet corner of the restaurant, where Emma approached him with a serious expression. "Dad," she signed, "I've been thinking about what I want to be when I grow up." Marcus smiled, remembering all the career aspirations Emma had cycled through over the years: veterinarian, teacher, artist, scientist. "What are you thinking about now?" "I want to do what you do," Emma replied. "But I want to help deaf kids and their families before they need fixing. I want to make sure schools and companies are ready for us from the beginning." The maturity and vision in her words took Marcus's breath away. At 9 years old, Emma was already thinking about systemic change and prevention, rather than just individual accommodation. "That sounds like an amazing goal," Marcus signed back. "What would you need to learn to do that kind of work?" Emma had clearly thought about this extensively. "I need to understand how businesses work, how schools make decisions, and how laws get made. Sophie and I have been talking about this. We want to start a club for deaf and hearing kids to work together on making things better." As the evening wound down and families began heading home, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary transformation that had occurred in just 1 year. Emma's simple birthday party had catalyzed changes that were now affecting hundreds of lives and would continue expanding for years to come. The scared single father who had worried about his daughter's social acceptance had evolved into a confident advocate, changing workplace culture across multiple organizations. The quiet 8-year-old who had felt isolated by her deafness had become articulate leader, inspiring peers and adults alike. But perhaps most importantly, they had discovered that their greatest challenges could become their most powerful tools for creating positive change. Emma's deafness, which Marcus had once seen as an obstacle to overcome, had become the foundation for a mission that was improving life for countless other families. As they drove home that night, Emma signed sleepily from the back seat. "Dad, do you think we really made a difference?" Marcus looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror, this remarkable young person who had taught him that limitations existed primarily in other people's assumptions, rather than in any inherent disability. Yes, sweetheart. He signed back with one hand while keeping the other on the steering wheel. I think we've just gotten started. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities that neither had imagined possible just 1 year earlier. Emma would continue growing into the leader she was already becoming. Marcus would keep developing programs and policies that created opportunities for others. And somewhere, other families were just beginning their own journeys toward inclusion and acceptance. The birthday celebration that had changed everything was now a memory, but the community, connections, and commitment to change that it had generated would continue growing for years to come. In a world that often seemed divided by differences, they had proven that those same differences, when embraced and celebrated, could become bridges to understanding and sources of strength for everyone.